Hey, when in the world is dinner going to be ready?
I'm cooking it now. It must be tough on you do it with such a useless wife.
We need to teach your wife how to behave. She's such an airhead, I don't know what to do.
Is what my in-laws said as they laughed loudly. Feeling like I was at my wit's end, I decided I had to leave this house. My name is Natalie. I'm a 25-year-old housewife. Since I was young, I've always been the type to avoid conflict with others. That's why from elementary school on, I had a tendency of being a yes man to everyone with more power than me in class. I would accept anything my teachers said, even if it was unreasonable. Even though I did my best to go along with the people around me, I would just end up getting bullied instead. I always tried to make everyone happy, but I ended up catching the attention of two popular kids in my class who were leaders of opposing cliques. I ended up getting ignored by everyone and sometimes really cruelly abused. I held myself back, thinking that it would come to an end soon enough. But the harassment didn't end. I was told that I had to pick a side between the two cliques, and I was abused until I picked one. I didn't understand why I had to do something like that. It was sad and frustrating. But no matter how tough it was on me, I couldn't talk to my parents about it. My parents both worked full-time and were always very busy. At the time, I didn't know the details very well, but my grandma on my mom's side was very ill. In order to pay for her hospital bills, my mom worked non-stop. My dad worked in order to make enough money for the three of us to survive. My parents were always busy and exhausted, and I didn't want to burden them. So I ended up holding in my emotions and not talking to my parents about it. But that wasn't good. The harassment only escalated, even after I started middle school. My body reached its limit. One morning I tried to get up to go to school, but my body wouldn't move. I did my best to eat breakfast and get ready to leave the house, but my body felt shockingly heavy. My mom saw that I had finished eating and getting ready, so of course, she said, "What are you doing? Get going." All I could do is say I didn't feel well, but my mom didn't believe me at first. "You seemed just fine while you were eating breakfast. I need to get to work soon, so it's time for you to go to school too." Fine. I didn't want to bother my mom, but my body wouldn't move. I felt bad that I was causing my mom trouble and began to panic because my body wasn't moving. My face became pale. I started sweating like crazy and grasping for air. At this point, my mom realized something was wrong and took me to the hospital. We were told that these were symptoms of extreme stress. I couldn't hide it from my mom anymore, so I finally told her how I was getting harassed at school. She hugged me, crying and apologizing for not noticing that something was wrong until now. I also cried uncontrollably, regretting that I hadn't spoken to my parents about this earlier. My mom told my dad, and he also apologized for not noticing earlier. I didn't want them to apologize, so I felt sorry for making them feel guilty. But after talking to my parents about what was happening, I felt better. My parents told me I didn't have to force myself to go to school, so I rested at home for a while. Even though I was a child, I felt like I couldn't just laze around at home all day. In order to help my mom out, I began learning how to do housework. I started with cleaning and laundry and then began learning my mom's recipes as I'd help her in the kitchen. Thanks to that, I learned to cook on my own and began cooking dinner for my family, apart from any fried dishes which I left my mom to prepare. "Natalie, you cooking for us is a huge help."
And it's delicious. You're a genius.
My parents would compliment me and tell me how grateful they were. That made me happy, so I worked hard around the house. I'm the type who gets hooked on things once I start them. Wanting to make the house as spotless as possible, I began studying all sorts of ways to clean. I began memorizing recipes from cookbooks as well. Eventually our home was sparkling and I knew hundreds of recipes. Having begun to grocery shop for our family as well, I figured out how to shop while saving money. I would challenge myself by making the most delicious food possible with cheap ingredients. I enjoyed housework. I'm sure it was mostly because I was happy about getting complimented by my parents, but I also genuinely enjoyed cooking and doing chores more than most other people do. I got really into it and tried all sorts of things. Focused on my role of taking care of the house, 3 years flew by before I even realized. I was 16 years old then, an age when most people go to high school. Around that time, my parents began talking to me seriously about what I wanted for my future. Out of the several ideas we came up with, I was most interested in attending high school online. I knew that with such a weak educational background, I wouldn't be able to step out into the real world very easily. And truth be told, I wanted to experience student life. So, I joined an online high school. Apart from that, my day-to-day didn't change much. I just added a bit of studying onto the housework I did usually. I was never much of a genius, but since I was young, my grades have always been decent because I put effort into study. So the classes I took now were no problem. 3 years of online classes later, I was able to get my GED. I thought that dropping out of middle school would be the end of my life, but it really wasn't. I was able to properly get my GED after all.
Natalie, you've really worked hard. I'm so proud of you.
Mom, Dad, thank you. It's because of you two that I've been able to get this far. Expressing my gratitude to them, my parents began to cry. After graduating high school, it was time for me to start working, but I didn't know what I should do for a job. Since I didn't attend school in person, working for a normal company would probably be difficult for me. Wondering what I should do, my mom came up with a plan.
Why don't you try working as a housekeeper? Those sorts of service jobs seem to be increasing these days.
So jobs like that exist too. I began researching and found a few related companies that were hiring at the moment. I wasn't too picky when it came to salary or anything, so I applied immediately. I was chosen for an interview where my boss took a liking to me and I was hired almost immediately. I went to a few trainings after getting hired, but I guess my talents were pretty obvious. After all the research and practice I had done on my own, I had really become skilled. The rest of the staff were mostly housewives who were busy with their own families while I was free to work as much as I wanted, so I quickly began working full-time. I started off by following a senior employee, but once I had gotten somewhat used to the job, I was assigned tasks on my own. I'm not very good at communicating with big groups of people, but when it comes to jobs like this, where I generally communicate one-on-one with customers, I have no problem. I realized that being good at meeting others' needs is an important skill and allows you to listen properly to others' wishes. For the first time in my life, I felt like my weakness was my strength. I began approaching my job with confidence, and that brought me even better results. I had regular customers and my pay rose. I never imagined a shut-in like me would be able to work like this. I had been working for my company for 3 years when I met Dewitt. Dewitt was one of our company's customers who often chose me to clean his house. He was a bachelor with little time after work for chores, which is why he hired me to clean, do laundry, and cook. I put my all into cleaning and cooking nutritious meals for him each time. I also made sure to meal prep so he had what to eat on days I wasn't scheduled to visit. He seemed touched by my efforts and often thanked me. After about a year of being my regular customer, we had built up a good rapport. Around that time, he asked me out on a date.
If it's okay with you, I'd like to meet you privately as well.
Honestly, I was also interested in him, so I agreed to go on a date. Shortly after starting dating, I ended up moving in with him. After cleaning Dewitt's home for a year, I knew where everything was and was more used to his kitchen than he was. After living together 2 years, he proposed. I was incredibly happy and quickly said yes, and like that, we were engaged. My parents were also super happy, which made me feel like I was being a good daughter to them. After announcing our engagement, our families met for the first time and we had our wedding ceremony. After going on our honeymoon, we returned to our apartment and began our newlywed life. Being newlywed was super fun. Though we had lived together before, there was something exciting about being married. It was as if we were living together for the first time all over again. A year passed in the blink of an eye. We were living together happily, and I began to think it was about time for us to start a family. But our married life took a turn I didn't expect. One day,
"We're going to my parents' house next week. I promised them."
Promised them what?
"That we'll move in with them."
My husband suddenly began talking about living with his parents. I haven't heard anything about this.
"That's because I'm telling you now, but it's been decided."
No way. My husband told me to start packing our things. DeWitt has a demanding side to him. Something I learned about after we got married. Unable to protest, I packed up our belongings and we moved to his parents' house. Hazel, Barney, we might cause you some trouble from now on, but thank you in advance. You finally made it. We've been waiting forever.
"Our maid is here. Mom, use her as much as you like. Being a maid is her strong point."
I was shocked by what my husband said. How could he say something like that? And just like DeWitt had said, his parents began using me however they pleased. Apart from housework, they also sent me to do their grocery shopping, send mail, buy gifts for their friends, and so on. My husband would also command me around.
"Do what my mom tells you."
He was really aggressive. DeWitt was like a different person when he was with his parents. They were totally harassing me. My in-laws seemed to enjoy it too.
"You idiot! Get to work."
DeWitt was kind enough to marry you because you're young. You should at least do the housework properly. My in-laws forced me to fulfill their wishes. When one minute they tell me to make coffee, and right as I am finishing making the coffee, they tell me they want tea instead. Of course, I won't be able to serve them their drinks that quickly. But they would use that as an excuse to scold me. They would then tell my husband that I'm a useless wife, and he would get mad at me as well. Why did things become like this? I began regretting marrying DeWitt. It seems that DeWitt planned on moving back in with his parents after getting married from the get-go, so that his parents could use his wife as their slave. I was a young housekeeper. Since I was good at housework and young, DeWitt thought I'd fit the bill. When DeWitt and his parents told me about his plan with huge grins on their faces, I was shocked. I wanted to run away. But after getting married, I became a housewife. Even if I ran away, I didn't have a job. The abuse from my in-laws really took a toll on me mentally. Around that time, my in-laws began pressuring me that it was time for me to have kids. When you're under that much pressure, you become unable to do things you usually can. And I knew that if I did have a child, I'd never be able to escape that house. The idea that I'd have to spend the rest of my life with that family was unbearable. They continued to take advantage of me.
Hey, when in the world is dinner going to be ready?"
I'm cooking it now. It must be tough on you, DeWitt, with such a useless wife.
"We need to teach your wife how to behave." "She's such an airhead. I don't know what to do,"
is what my in-laws said as they laughed loudly. I cooked in a rush. Until just a bit earlier, they told me they wanted to eat meat, but as soon as I finished cooking, they suddenly told me they wanted fish instead, and sent me to the supermarket a second time. Of course, they said it's all my fault that dinner was taking time. Just as I was about to serve dinner, the three of them suddenly began preparing to leave the house. Huh? Where are you going?
"You're too slow, so we're going out to eat."
What? But I'm just about to finish.
"We feel like eating out now. We don't need what you cooked anymore."
They left the house with smiles on their faces. What? Even though I went through all that effort to cook? The 2 meals they had made me cook sat on the kitchen counter. 4 servings. As I stared at the food, tears began pouring down my face. Feeling I was at my limit, I decided I had to leave this house. Things proceeded quickly. I packed my bags before my husband and in-laws returned home. I'm not the type who shops for myself much, but even I was surprised when it only took me 10 minutes to pack all my things. What took me the most time was pouring the meals I had just cooked into Tupperware containers. I didn't want the food I had put so much effort into cooking to just be thrown away, so I thought I'd take them with me. As soon as I finished packing my things, I went to my parents. I had called my parents on the way, so they greeted me warmly as soon as I arrived.
You've been through a lot.
Hearing those words, I felt my heart burst from all the emotions I had been holding in this whole time, and I began sobbing. Though the situation was slightly different, I felt just like I did when I hadn't turned to my parents when I was bullied in school. I was an adult, but I made the same mistake as before. Comforted by my parents, my heart finally calmed down. My husband began ringing me furiously, but I ignored him and relaxed at my parents. The next day, without picking up any of his calls, I emailed Dewitt telling him I wanted a divorce. He tried calling me countless times, but I continued to ignore him. After some time passed, he sent divorce papers to my parents' house. It seems he finally accepted it. I immediately filed them, and like that we were divorced. I had escaped from my in-laws. It was a close call. Afterwards, I began working as a housekeeper again. After being treated so horribly by my in-laws, having customers thank me made me very happy. I also realized really how insane they were. I went back to my work life. Without realizing, 5 years passed. I'm still working for the same company and living with my parents. To think I would meet those people again. It was on my day off. The doorbell rang, and when I opened my front door, I saw them standing there. "What are you doing here?" Dewitt and his parents began speaking with grins on their faces.
Have you finally calmed down? I'll forgive you, so come back.
He's telling you he'll take you back as his wife.
My mother also needs a carer, so we'll talk about that later.
They tried entering my home. Hey, stop it. Home invasion is illegal.
What are you saying? You're my wife. What's wrong with your family entering your home?
What were they talking about?
Come on, let us in.
You're going to clean our house and take care of my mother.
Of course not. I laughed while saying this, and my ex-in-laws froze, bewildered. I divorced you and remarried.
Huh?
My husband, Martin, came down from the second floor. Sorry, Martin, were we too loud? You're on night shift tonight, so I didn't mean to wake you.
Don't worry.
My ex-family were shocked to see my current husband.
Who is this?
My ex-husband and his parents suddenly came to tell me to go back home with them.
I see. They really are tyrannical.
Martin stood in front of them and told them to leave. Since he was over 6 foot tall and muscular, my ex-family seemed threatened by Martin.
Quit messing around. I never accepted a divorce. You're having an affair.
Dewitt began spouting nonsense.
The divorce was officially filed, but you're trying to force your way into our home? Wouldn't you say that's home invasion?
I spoke up. Martin is a cop, so he can arrest you on the spot. Dewitt replied.
A cop?
Dewitt and his parents suddenly panicked.
I can call my people right now and get you locked up.
Martin glared at Dewitt and his parents, who were dripping in sweat.
Excuse us,
Dewitt said, and they ran away. They were unbelievable. Later, I received a long email from Dewitt. I thought he'd tried to apologize, but it turned out to be a romantic letter trying to persuade me to get back with him. It seemed that his grandmother was in need of someone to take care of her, which they wanted to pin on me. It also turns out that his father had made a big mistake at work, so he had been fired and was currently unemployed. I was glad I cut off ties with them a long time ago. My current husband is someone I had known since I was young, who reached out to me after finding out I had gotten a divorce. After dating for some time, we got married last year and he moved in with my parents and I. He was reliable and really loved me, so I was happy that we got married. I'm sure that from now on, I'll live a happy life with my husband and parents.